Have you ever wondered what the ketores smelled like? The very, very pleasant smelling ketores, the incense, which is described in this week's Parsha, Parshas Kisisa, is something that is so special, and we have never yet in our lifetime had the opportunity to actually experience. Twice a day on the Mizbeach Hazov, the inner Mizbeach, the ketores was brought in the Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash, a collection, a special recipe, if you will, of 11 spices. And Chazal tell us regarding the ketores chaviva haketores of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the ketores was special and dear before HaKadosh Baruch Hu, more so than all of the other karbanos. There was something very unique, very special about the ketores. The Gemara in Maseches Yoma Daf Mem Daled says as follows: Tana debei Rabbi Shmuel, Alma ketores mechaperes. The Gemara assumes that every aspect of the avodah in the mikdash must come to be mechaper, to allow to facilitate atonement for a special sin, a unique and specific sin. So the Gemara says, Alma ketores mechaperes. For what sin does the ketores come to atone? And the Gemara says, Al lashon hara, that the ketores is an atonement for lashon hara. How so? Yavo davar shebechashoy v'yichaper al maiso chashoy. Says the Gemara, something which is brought bechashoy, literally in silence, in privacy. The ketores, after all, as I already mentioned, was brought inside the heichal. It was not something that was offered in public. Very few people were able to actually get close up and to experience, to get a real opportunity to witness the haktarah, the hakravas haktaras. It was something which was very, very private, and so therefore this avodah comes to be mechaper. It comes to atone on a sin that is also often committed in private. That there is something about the bringing of the ketores and the fact that it is something which is quiet, which brings to mind the sin of lashon hara, which unfortunately so often is committed in a very similar fashion. But I'd like to spend a few minutes tonight maybe probing that just a little deeper and really trying to ask what may be on perhaps a more deeper level, what may Chazal be pointing us to and trying to help us understand and appreciate. After all, what may be the connection between the ketores and lashon hara? So I'd like to suggest this evening three possibilities. I'm sure that there are many, many approaches that have been offered, but I'd like to suggest this evening briefly three different possibilities. First of all, the recipe for the ketores, if you will, was preserved and protected for many, many centuries. In fact, the Gemara Maseches Yoma tells us that there was a specific family, the Avtinas family, that had the special formula for the ketores in their family, and they preserved it for many, many generations. And no one else was able to actually acquire this sort of top secret information. And perhaps this is a reminder of something that we should all remember in life, and that is that not all secrets should be shared with others. Often, when we are guilty of speaking lashon hara, so we've made a choice consciously, sometimes unwittingly, without giving it much thought, to divulge, to share information that perhaps should not have been shared. And would we not all be better off if we would think before speaking and say to ourselves, is this really something that should be shared? Would we not all be better off if I would just keep this to myself? And just as the ketores was able to remain so special, so chaviva of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, precisely because of the fact that that special, unique formula, the specific identification of the very spices and the exact proportions, and like I said, sort of the recipe of the ketores was something that was hidden and was not available to anyone. You couldn't download the recipe, if you will, on the internet. It was something that was really, really, really held very, very, very closely and preserved because it was, after all, something that was very sacred. We also should give more thought before we actually go ahead and speak our mind and say things that should not be said. You know, the Torah tells us that we are not to gossip. Lo selech rachil ba'amecha. You should not tell what we call rechilos, gossip. Now, the word rachil, rechilos, is of course associated, it's connected to the word rochel, which means a peddler. A person who goes ahead and gossips, peddles information. This person just walks around and basically shares things that really should not be shared, things that should be kept quiet. I know that Purim is behind us, but really only a week. And so therefore we can reflect backwards and remind ourselves how the Megillah tells us, and Chazal highlight the fact that Esther was someone who did not reveal everything about her identity, about her heritage, about her family. And that was ultimately a very, very important feature to the Yeshua, the salvation of the Jewish people. Chazal tell us that Esther, of course, being a descendant of Shaul Melech and of Rachel and Binyamin, in that family, they all appreciated and they valued the art, which is what Chazal tell us, the art of shtika, of knowing how to be quiet. Secondly, I would suggest that the specific ingredients and the proportions of the incense, the Ketores, were critical, and any deviation from that, if let's say we were missing a particular spice and we wanted to substitute with something else, so that would not be acceptable. In fact, this would be punishable by a very serious punishment of Misbeh de Shemayim. This was not something that was tolerated, because after all, the Ketores is something that has to be prepared in a precise way. And to change it even a little bit shows a lack of appreciation for the perfection, if you will, of this specific formula. So too, I would suggest that our assessments of each other, other people, and the situations in which they find themselves must also be held in a very similar regard. There are often, maybe even always, mitigating factors which we do not necessarily take into account when we speak about other people, particularly when we speak critically about other people, because we're not aware of them. We just don't know. But yet we don't take the necessary precautions before speaking. We rush to judgment, and we go ahead and report what we like to report, what gives us some sense of satisfaction in the moment, without taking into consideration, and often without conveying the complexities, the nuance, the need to go ahead and to stop. And Chazal say, Al tadin es chavercha ad shetagil makomo. Do not judge another person until you have literally arrived at their place, which I believe is something that we can't truly ever do. In other words, Chazal is saying, don't judge people, because you can't really know what they are experiencing, what they are going through. What gives us the right to be critical of one another if we don't really understand the experience of another person? So the Ketores serves as a reminder that details matter. And if you're just going to go ahead and swap a little information here and there, it doesn't really make a difference. Well, when it comes to Ketores, it certainly does make a difference. It makes such a difference that if a person goes ahead and makes such a change, so it's chayv misbeh de shemayim. So certainly when it comes to talking about other individuals, similarly, we should bear this in mind. And finally, I would suggest that of all of the different karbanos and the different forms of avoda in the Beis HaMikdash, it was specifically the Ketores, which, as I mentioned, was identified by Chazal as being the most sacred, meaningful part of our avoda, the worship. And how interesting and ironic this is, given the fact that Ketores, unlike the other forms of avoda, is not really a tangible object. It's true that it comes from various spices that are gathered and mixed together, but ultimately, the Haktarah is something in which it is ignited, it is basically put on fire, and there's a smoke, there's a cloud that just rises up. It's not an animal. It is not a mincha, a flower offering. It is not a candle like they had in the menorah or the lechem apanim on the shulchan. It lacks most of the features of anything that has sort of a concrete nature to it. But yet, despite the fact that it is in some ways sort of the most elusive, it is the least concrete, but we see it was quite consequential and significant in its role in the avoda in the mikdash. And similarly, I would suggest that we should understand and appreciate when it comes to the words that we use. And this could be said always in general, but particularly be mindful of this when speaking about other people, that words have meaning and words really matter. Sometimes we underestimate the effects and the dangers of evil speech, and we tell ourselves, well, it's just words, right? As we were all taught when we were children, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words, well, they'll never harm me. But in Judaism, we're taught something else. In reality, in Hebrew, the word davar, dalid beis resh. So what does that word mean? So it really means two different things. It means thing, A davar is a thing, meaning some physical matter, and it also means a word. The same word in Hebrew for thing, meaning words are things. They do count. They do matter. They can kill. So even though we are taught, sticks and stones can break our bones, but words, well, they don't matter, but that's not true. They actually do matter. A word is a davar. A word is a thing. And the Ketores, again, is a reminder that even when you can't touch things, and even when they are not so concrete and when they are not so tangible, they can have a very, very, very big impact. In this case of the Ketores, it had a very positive impact, right? As Chazal tell us, this was such a special, important component of the Avoda, but it's a reminder to take everything in life seriously, not only the things that we can touch, and not only the things that we can actually feel with our hands, but to recognize and to appreciate that sometimes, as they say, the best things in life aren't things, and sometimes the most impactful things in life, the things that matter much the most, that could be most helpful, and in some cases most harmful, are also not things, or they are, because the word davar once again means word and means things. So here, Chazal tell us in summary in Maseches Yom Daf Mem Daled that the Ketores was brought as a kapara for Lashon Hara. And we are suggesting that there could be many, I'm sure there are many more. We suggest tonight 3 ways to understand the connection between Lashon Hara and the Ketores. Each and every one of them, I'm hoping, providing us with perspective. Even though we do not have the ability to offer the Ketores today, we do not have the ability to smell the sweet scent of the Ketores. We don't have the ability to connect ourselves with the Avoda in a tangible way in that regard. But the lessons of the Ketores, the messages embedded within the Ketores, and to the extent that it relates to the circumstances that we experience each and every day, dealing with other people, speaking with other people, speaking about other people. So we should remember that the legacy of the Ketores is certainly one that continue to inspire us and allow us to achieve a kapara in matters of Lashon Hara. We should be more mindful to keep secrets to ourselves, not be so quick to divulge and to share information that should not be shared. Remember that the special formula recipe for the Ketores was preserved in one family for many, many, many generations, because they realized that this was something that was sacred. This is not something that should be just be shared. So we as well should be careful to hold on to that which is shared with us, to hold on to things that we see. Don't be so quick to go ahead and be a rachil. Just go ahead and to share and to peddle information in that way. And hopefully the Ketores, the legacy, the message of the Ketores will continue to inspire us every day of our life. Thank you, everybody, for joining me. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom and good Shabbos and a wonderful evening. We'll see you soon. Thank you.